What if I told you that everyone in your life could be replaced one by one, and you'd be the only person who noticed? That's what happened to a woman named Renee. And by the end of this story, you'll never look at your own family the same way again. Renee came home from a work trip on a Tuesday evening, tired, jet-lagged, ready to collapse into her own bed. Her husband, Paul, greeted her at the door with a hug. Except it didn't feel like Paul's hug. She told herself she was imagining it. 8 days apart. Of course, things felt slightly off. At dinner, her son Mateo talked about school, about a math test, about a friend named Diego she'd never heard him mention before. "Since when do you have a friend named Diego?" she asked, laughing it off. Mateo looked at her strangely. "Mom, Diego's been my best friend since 3rd grade. You met his mom at the spring recital." Renee smiled and let it go. She was tired. That was all. But that night, lying next to Paul, she noticed something that made her stomach twist. A small scar, just above his left eyebrow, that she had never seen before. She knew every inch of her husband's face. 12 years of marriage. She would have noticed a scar. She asked him about it. Paul touched his eyebrow, confused. "Renee, I've had this since I was a teenager. Bike accident. You've literally touched it 100 times. His voice wasn't annoyed. It was gentle, concerned even, which somehow made it worse. The next morning, she went through old photos on her phone, scrolling back years, looking for Paul's face without the scar. Every single photo. The scar was there, in their wedding photos, in photos from their honeymoon, in a photo from their first date that she had taken herself on a disposable camera 15 years ago. The scar was always there. Renee sat on the bathroom floor for a long time, staring at her own reflection, trying to convince herself that memory was simply unreliable, that the brain fills in gaps, that eyewitnesses misremember things all the time. She'd read that somewhere, hadn't she? She wanted to believe that. She almost did. Then she noticed the photo on the hallway wall, a family photo from 4 years ago, taken at her sister's house. There were 5 people in the photo: Renee, Paul, Mateo, her sister Carla, and a 5th person she didn't recognize, a woman standing beside Carla, smiling warmly, an arm around Carla's shoulder, like they'd known each other for years. Renee called Carla immediately. "Who's the woman next to you in the photo from the barbecue? The one from 4 years ago?" There was a pause on the line. "Renee, that's Jill, my wife." "You don't have a wife." Another pause, longer this time. "Renee, we've been married for 6 years. You were there. You gave a toast." Renee's hands started shaking. "I don't know a Jill. I've never met a Jill in my life." Carla's voice grew soft, careful, the way you speak to someone you're worried about. "Renee, are you feeling okay? Do you want me to come over?" Renee said no. Hung up. Sat with her phone in her lap for a long time, feeling the walls of her own life quietly rearranging themselves around her. She began writing things down, every detail she was certain of, every memory she could verify, building a private record, like evidence in a case only she seemed to be building. She found she could verify almost nothing. Old emails referenced people she didn't remember, text threads with friends she couldn't place. A calendar full of appointments and events attributed to a life that felt, increasingly, like it belonged to someone standing just slightly behind her, wearing her face. She started to wonder quietly, terribly, if the problem wasn't the world, if the problem was her. She made an appointment with a doctor, said nothing about the scar, the photo, the wife who apparently didn't exist to her, just said she'd been having some memory trouble. The doctor ran basic tests. Everything came back normal. "Sometimes," the doctor said gently, "when we're under a lot of stress, our brains create small inconsistencies. It doesn't mean anything is wrong with you." Renee wanted to ask, "What if it isn't my brain? What if it's everyone else's?" She didn't ask that out loud. She knew exactly how that would sound. That night, she lay in bed next to Paul, staring at the ceiling, running her fingers along the ridge of a scar she still didn't remember, trying to feel something that matched 12 years of marriage. Paul rolled over and looked at her in the dark. "You've seemed different since you got back," he said quietly, "like you're looking at me like I'm a stranger." Renee didn't answer. "You know," he said, "sometimes I wonder the same thing about you. Like you came back from that trip a little different. Smaller changes. The way you hold your coffee cup. The way you laugh at things that used to make you cry." He said it gently, almost lovingly. But something in his tone made the hair on Renee's arm stand up. "What do you mean?" she whispered. Paul smiled in the dark, in a way she couldn't quite see clearly. "I just mean people change, Renee. All the time, in small ways. Most people don't even notice it happening to themselves." Renee lay perfectly still. "Do you ever wonder," Paul continued, voice soft as a lullaby, "if the version of you that left on that trip is really the same version that came back?" She wanted to laugh it off. She wanted to tell him he was being strange, that of course she was the same person, that this whole thing was exhaustion and jet lag and nothing more. Instead, she found herself lying there in silence, turning the question over in her mind. Because the truth was, she didn't fully remember the flight home either. She remembered leaving the hotel. She remembered the airport, vaguely, lights and gates blurring together. And then she remembered being at her own front door, hand already raised to knock, though she couldn't recall taking out her keys, as if several hours of her own life were simply missing, replaced with nothing at all. The next morning, Mateo asked her at breakfast, in the plain, unbothered voice of a child who has no idea he's asking something enormous, "Mom, why do you keep looking at us like you're trying to remember who we are?" Renee opened her mouth to answer. She realized in that moment that she didn't actually know. She looked at her own hands, resting on the kitchen table. They looked exactly like her hands always had. She had no way of knowing if that meant anything at all. Somewhere in this house, in this family, in this life stitched together from photographs and other people's certainty, one piece did not belong. Renee simply no longer knew which piece that was, her or everyone else. And the most unsettling part wasn't the not knowing. It was that every single day, that question got a little quieter, a little easier to stop asking. Until one day she suspected she would stop wondering entirely. And whoever she'd become by then would simply sit down at this table, drink her coffee, laugh at things that used to make her cry, and never think about any of this again.